Okay, so this is called Let It Ring, Keep Living, and I want to explain what that actually means before we get into anything else. This isn't a talk about how to calm yourself down faster. It's not a talk about how to get rid of anxiety, and it's definitely not a talk about how to fix your thoughts. This is about something way more practical and honestly way more freeing. Most of us with OCD or anxiety spend a huge amount of our lives responding to alarms in our head, thoughts, feelings, sensations, what ifs. They show up and our brain treats them like emergencies. So we check, we analyze, we reassure ourselves, we avoid, we try to cope, we try to calm down. And for a second, it feels better. But then it comes back and usually stronger. So, what this is really about is learning the art of non response, not ignoring your brain, not fighting it, not arguing with it, but also not organizing your whole life around it. Let it ring, keep living means the alarm can be there and you don't have to stop your life because of it. You don't have to fix it first. You don't have to feel calm first. You don't have to get certainty first. You can let the noise exist in the background and still move forward with your day. And we're also going to talk about something really important: how a lot of coping strategies accidentally turn into new compulsions, how trying to feel better can actually keep the loop going, and how the real shift isn't in your thoughts or your feelings, it's in what you do next. So, this is not about becoming fearless, it's about getting your life back, even while your nervous system is still loud. This is about stopping the habit of answering every false alarm and learning how to keep living anyway. So, I'm from Oklahoma, and if you've ever lived here, you know this is just a normal part of life. Every single Saturday at noon, the tornado sirens get tested, and they are loud. Like, can't ignore it loud. They're designed to cut through whatever you're doing and grab your attention. And even when you know it's coming, your body still jumps a little. You still flinch. Your nervous system reacts before your brain has time to go, oh, yeah, it's Saturday. But here's the important part: because it's Saturday at noon, nobody runs to the basement. Nobody cancels their day. Nobody assumes a tornado is actually happening. People pause for a second and then they just go back to what they were already doing: eating lunch, talking, watching TV, living their life. The siren is loud, it's uncomfortable, it's impossible to ignore, but it's also just a test. And that's a really good way to understand what OCD and anxiety alarms are like. They're loud, they're intense, they grab your attention, your body reacts. But loud doesn't mean dangerous, startling doesn't mean urgent, and noise doesn't mean you have to stop your life. We're going to use this idea a lot because this is basically the skill we're learning: letting the alarm be there and continuing your life anyway. Okay, so this is the part where I want to zoom in a little and explain why this alarm gets so stuck in the first place. And I promise I'm not here to turn this into a neuroscience lecture. Think of your brain like it has two main parts for this: one part that goes, hey, something might be wrong, and another part that's supposed to go, okay, got it, we checked, we can move on now. In OCD and anxiety, that second part, the gear shift, kind of sticks. So the something is wrong signal fires, but it doesn't shut off properly. It doesn't turn the page. It doesn't close the loop. And because it doesn't close, your brain keeps sending the same alarm over and over and over again. That's why it can feel like your brain won't let something go. That's why you can get stuck on one thought, one feeling, one sensation, one what if. It's not because you're dramatic. It's not because you're weak. It's not because you're doing life wrong. It's a machine error, not a character flaw. Chemically, your brain stays kind of revved up and the alarm just keeps ringing, which is also why it feels so real and so urgent. Your nervous system is literally being told, hey, this isn't done yet. And this is important. You cannot fix a sticky gear shift by arguing with it. You can't logic it into shifting. You can't reassure it into shifting. You can't think it into shifting. What actually teaches it to shift again is what you do when the alarm is ringing. Not how much you explain it, not how much you analyze it, but whether you keep living your life anyway. Okay, so let's take that Saturday siren idea and push it a little further. Imagine if every single Saturday at noon, when the test siren went off, you ran to the basement. You grabbed your family, you panicked, you hid. What would your brain learn? It wouldn't learn, oh, that was just a test. It would learn, we survived because we ran. And that's exactly how OCD and anxiety get trained. The alarm goes off. Anxiety spikes. You check, fix, reassure, avoid, analyze, whatever your version is. And then, yeah, The anxiety drops a little, not forever, not completely, but enough for your brain to go, see, that worked. So now your brain connects the dots. Alarm to do the thing, to feel a little better, to must do the thing again next time. That's the reinforcement cycle. And the cost of it is that the next alarm comes back louder, faster, and more convincing. Not because you're getting worse, not because you're failing, but because your brain is doing what brains do, learning from what worked last time. And this is the really uncomfortable truth. Every time we treat a test alarm like a real tornado, we accidentally teach our brain that the alarm was right. Okay, this slide right here is one of the biggest mindset shifts in all of this. Most of us have been trained by anxiety, by OCD, by just being human to chase relief. When anxiety spikes, the goal becomes, how do I feel better right now? And honestly, that makes total sense. Anxiety feels awful. Of course, you want it to stop. But here's the problem: feeling better and getting better are not the same thing. Feeling better is about lowering anxiety in the moment. You check, you fix, you reassure, you avoid, you analyze. And yeah, the anxiety drops a bit, your nervous system sighs in relief. But the cost is that the cycle keeps going because your brain learns, oh, that worked, do that again next time. Getting better is different. Getting better is about retraining your brain over time. And that usually means the anxiety stays high in the moment. It feels harder. It feels backwards. It feels like you're doing the wrong thing. But what you're actually doing is teaching your brain that the alarm doesn't control your behavior anymore. So the real question in recovery isn't, how do I feel right now? It's, what am I teaching my brain right now? Relief feels good today. Recovery builds freedom later. Okay, this slide is really important because this is where a lot of people get stuck without realizing it. When we think of compulsions, we usually think of the obvious stuff: washing hands, checking locks, tapping, repeating things, the visible behaviors. And yeah, those count. But here's the part nobody warns you about: you can sit perfectly still on the outside and still be running to the basement on the inside. Mental compulsions are sneaky. They look like thinking, they look like trying to understand, they look like trying to calm yourself down. Things like ruminating, analyzing why you feel this way, checking how you feel, reassuring yourself, planning for the worst, replaying conversations, trying to solve the thought. It feels productive. It feels responsible. It feels like coping, but functionally, it's the same as running to the basement during the test siren. You're still responding to the alarm. You're still treating it like it means danger. And your brain doesn't really care whether you ran with your body or ran with your mind. The lesson it learns is the same. That alarm mattered. We had to do something about it. And this line is the key one. If you are arguing with the siren, you are feeding it. Not because you're doing something wrong, not because you're weak, but because attention, analysis, and reassurance are still responses. And responses are what keep the alarm trained to keep ringing. Okay, this is the skill, not the theory, not the metaphor, the actual move you practice in real life. Notice, allow, return. First, notice the siren. That just means you recognize what's happening. Okay, this is my OCD. This is my anxiety alarm. Not in a dramatic way, not in a reassuring way, just naming it like, yep, there it is. Second, allow the noise. This is the part people usually want to skip. Allow means you don't argue with it. You don't try to push it away. You don't try to calm yourself down. You don't try to solve it. You let the feeling, the thought, the sensation be there, even though it's uncomfortable. Not because you like it, but because fighting it is still responding to the alarm. Third, return. This is the most important part. You manually shift the gear back to your life. You go back to the email, the dishes, the show, the conversation, the drive, the work, whatever you were doing before the alarm went off. And I really want to underline this. This is not about what you feel, it's about what you do. You can be anxious and still return. You can be uncomfortable and still return. You can feel completely unsettled and still return. The win is not, I feel calm. The win is, I didn't change my behavior because of the alarm. That's how you teach your brain over time that the siren doesn't run the day anymore. Okay, this is a really practical tool, and I want to be super clear about what it is and what it isn't. The 15-minute rule is not you telling yourself, I'm never going to check. That usually just makes your brain panic harder. And it's also not you trying to convince yourself the thought isn't important. It's you saying, not now, later. When the urge to check, analyze, reassure, or fix hits, you don't fight it and you don't obey it. You create a little space. You say something like, okay, maybe I'll come back to this in 15 minutes. But right now, I'm finishing this email. I'm staying in this conversation. I'm doing the dishes. I'm driving. I'm living. What you're really doing is creating a gap between the urge and the action. And that gap is everything. Most of the time, if you don't feed the urge right away, the intensity shifts on its own, not because you argued with it, not because you reassured yourself, but because your nervous system isn't being trained that this alarm needs an immediate response. Sometimes when the timer goes off, you won't even care anymore. Sometimes you'll still feel the urge, but it'll be weaker. And sometimes it'll still be there, and you can choose to delay again. The win here isn't the urge went away. The win is I didn't automatically obey it. You're teaching your brain we don't jump every time this alarm makes noise. Okay, so this slide is the why behind everything we just talked about with the 15-minute rule. There's a really simple rule in the brain called Hebb's Law. It basically says neurons that fire together wire together. In other words, whatever your brain does together a lot, and it learns to do automatically. But there's also the flip side of that, neurons that stop firing together and start to disconnect. This is exactly what's happening in OCD and anxiety. The fear fires and then the compulsion fires over and over and over. And your brain goes, cool, these two go together. So the pathway gets stronger, faster, louder. What you're doing when you notice the fear but don't do the compulsion is you're breaking that pairing. The fear still fires, the alarm still rings, but the usual follow-up behavior doesn't happen. And that's not just psychological, that's biological. You're literally starving that circuit. You're teaching your brain these two don't go together anymore. And over time, that connection weakens, not because you argued with it, not because you reassured yourself, but because you stopped feeding it. So when you delay, when you return to your life, when you don't respond the way you used to, you're not just being brave, you're doing physical brain retraining. You're starving the false alarm. Okay, this is another way to think about what you're doing when you practice non response. Right now, your brain's automatic transmission, the part that's supposed to smoothly shift you out of alarm mode, doesn't work very well. So you don't get that easy, natural shift back to calm. Not yet. That means for now, you have to drive stick shift. You have to manually shift your attention back to your life, back to the task, back to what you were doing. And yeah, it feels clunky. It takes effort. It feels awkward. It's exhausting at first. You're thinking about it way more than you want to. You're like, why is this so hard? That doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. That's exactly what learning a new skill feels like. At first, every shift is conscious. Every return to your life takes effort. But with repetition, something really cool happens. The manual shift starts to become more automatic. Your brain starts to learn the new pattern, not because you talked it into it, but because you practiced it. So if this feels hard right now, that's not a sign you're failing. That's a sign you're learning. Okay, this slide is about changing how you measure progress because this part can either make recovery easier or make it way harder than it needs to be. A lot of people secretly use this scorecard. Did I feel calm today? Did my anxiety go away? Do I feel normal yet? And then if the answer is no, they assume they're failing. But checking how you feel to see if it's working, that's actually just another compulsion. It keeps your attention glued to the alarm. So we're switching scorecards. The new scorecard is not, did I feel calm? The new scorecard is, did I change my plans because of anxiety? And if the answer is no, that's a win. Even if you felt awful, even if your body was loud, even if your brain was screaming at you the whole time, you felt terrible and you lived your life anyway. That's the work. That's recovery happening in real time. So frame success like this, not changing your behavior because of anxiety, not feeling better, not feeling brave, not feeling confident, just not letting the alarm decide what you do next. Okay, this is another way to think about what you're doing when you practice non-response. Right now, your brain's automatic transmission, the part that's supposed to smoothly shift you out of alarm mode, doesn't work very well. So you don't get that easy, natural shift back to calm. Not yet. That means for now, you have to drive stick shift. You have to manually shift your attention back to your life, back to the task, back to what you were doing. And yeah, it feels clunky. It takes effort. It feels awkward. It's exhausting at first. You're thinking about it way more than you want to. You're like, why is this so hard? That doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. That's exactly what learning a new skill feels like. At first, every shift is conscious. Every return to your life takes effort. But with repetition, something really cool happens. The manual shift starts to become more automatic. Your brain starts to learn the new pattern, not because you talked it into it, but because you practiced it. So if this feels hard right now, that's not a sign you're failing. That's a sign you're learning. I want to end with this because this is probably the most honest and most freeing truth in recovery. The alarm might not stop right away. Sometimes it gets quieter. Sometimes it fades into the background. Sometimes it changes themes. And sometimes it just keeps making noise for a while. Recovery is not the absence of the siren. Recovery is when the siren stops running your life. If you wait for the alarm to turn off before you live, you can end up waiting forever. And that doesn't mean you're broken. It means your brain is doing what brains do when they're scared. So the real work isn't how do I make this stop? The real work is how do I live my life even while this is here? You leave the house anyway. You go to the thing anyway. You send the email anyway. You have the conversation anyway. You live your values anyway. And over time, not because you argued with the alarm, not because you forced it to shut up, but because you stopped treating it like it's in charge, it starts to matter less. Recovery is the irrelevance of the siren. Let it ring. Keep living.